I think we're going to see multiple different kind of approaches to what's a really new format, and we might even see players learning a little bit from Pod 1 to Pod 2. The format is so fresh and so new that players are probably learning as the tournament goes along.
Yeah, for many players, this is really the first opportunity to play at a high level with these core set 19 cards.
Right.
So taking a look at this first pack, early thing that I see is Goreclaw, the Terror of Kalsima. Also taking a look at a Plague Mare, a Draconic Disciple. Quite a few options this pack.
Yeah, I mean, Goreclaw, a strong rare, and it's in a color that players have seemed to like. Obviously there are some other potential options here, but Goreclaw seems like a cut above to me.
Yeah, and even that mana cost, by only being the singular green, seems like it's a pretty nice spot to be in.
Yeah, the triggered ability comes up quite a bit. Obviously, the ability to just start slamming down Colossal Dreadmaws on turn 5. Goreclaw, the ability to accelerate it with Druid of the Cowl on turn 3 can lead to some very quick wins. So nice start for Mark.
Yeah, and actually taking that early on, I wonder if we'll see anything, or do you think that might affect his draft when it comes down to these small decisions? Some of these cards are a bit less efficient, but they do have that 4 power threshold.
Yeah, not yet. I mean, I think that right now, he's really just wants to figure out what colors he's going to be in. So he may end up into that sort of a draft as the draft goes along. But at this point, I think he's just looking to, figure out what color he's supposed to be in, solidify that, and then go from there.
Sure. And in this one, we've got Heroic Reinforcements, also a Vampire Neonate, which is a pretty popular card. It's that 1 mana that enables a lot of these life gain strategies. Bristling Boar, Divination, also in this one, and Gift of Paradise.
Yeah, be interested to see what he does here. So Heroic Reinforcement's by far the best card in the booster. Obviously doesn't combine at all with his Goreclaw from earlier. There are some reasonable but not that powerful green cards, so we'll see if he wants to keep himself open by taking the Heroic Reinforcements or solidify himself in green.
And we are going to take that Heroic Reinforcements, maybe just keeping himself open to see what cards are going to start working his way, taking the best card out of each pack.
Yeah, that's the Ben Stark school of drafting, right? You just start by taking the most powerful card of the first few boosters, and then let the signals dictate to you which one is going to be your direction.
Now, in this one, there's also this Colossal Majesty. That one stands out to me because this is another one of those cards that has got some synergy alongside that Goreclaw, because they both have that significance with creatures of power 4 or greater. But also in this pack, a couple of good options, the Satyr Enchanter and Boggart Brute.
Yeah, Boggart Brute stands out to me. Obviously, Boggart Brute would go with either of his first 2 picks. Satyr Enchanter is a card that I've actually been more impressed with as the weekend has gone along. Obviously, Satyr Enchanter is a different direction here. So it is the highest power level card in the pack. And so, again, Mark is going to kind of just keep his options open, take the highest power level card, and defer the decision as to which color he's going to be a little bit further down the line.
Or maybe just going for that super secret Naya deck that goes in a whole lot of different directions.
Yeah, just get that 4th pick Palladium Ores.
So we have got some nice options. Take Vengeance in there, Rise from the Grave. There's also a Volley Veteran, Dwarven Priest, Goblin Instigator in this pack, Elvish Rejuvenator.
Yeah, and the whole, there are cards in basically every color that are playable, so really still not a clear signal here from Mark. And he could very easily take any of these cards.
And Volley Veteran is going to be the take. Even without a whole lot of those Goblin synergies, it still comes in. It deals 1 damage to a creature that the opponent controls, sort of a red Skeleton Archer in some cases.
Yeah, and if I think Mark's preference would be to. The best card that he's drafted so far is Heroic Reinforcement, so his preference would be to get into a red-white deck, and certainly in red-white, Volley Veteran is quite strong.
Skeleton Archer, Pegasus Courser, a couple of the options in this pack. Also, there is the Stone Quarry, which is part of that mana base, but it looks like Pegasus Courser, the 1/3 flying for 3 that starts jumping other creatures beside it when it goes into combat.
Yeah, Pegasus Courser, both the best card in the booster and the one that fits the strategies he's trying to draft, either white-green or white-red best.
Taking a look through there, we do have another copy of Satyr Enchanter. There's a Plummet, a Mighty Leap, Marauders Axe, but that Satyr Enchanter, he took it before because it was the highest power card in the pack. Looks to be about a similar case this time.
And yeah, this is a really exciting moment for Mark in the draft. With 2 copies of Satyr Enchanter, he can very reliably have one on the battlefield in a lot of his games. So now taking cards, like the auras that go into a white-green, aura combo theme deck become very, very valuable. And all of a sudden, you don't risk running yourself into getting blown out by card disadvantage. So, I think that this is a really strong signal that white-green is the kind of archetype that he wants to draft, and I think he'll be happy to kind of solidify in white-green, barring something crazy.
Highland Game and Gear Per Guide, a couple of the options available for Mark Jacobson here.
Close pick, right? So in sealed deck, obviously we know Gear Per Guide is the better card. In booster draft, it's fairly close. Highland Game is certainly not the card you want to put in your deck if you can avoid it, but obviously as we've seen before, it's important to get some number of 2-drops.
And if you're moving into maybe the aura standpoint, maybe the Gear Per Guide is what you'd rather, because the Highland Game is much better suited to dying, but if you're going to be suiting it up,
right,
you won't really actually enter into that realm. Goblin Motivator, there is Psychic Corrosion, Amulet of Safekeeping, probably not going to be looking at that card too closely. Trusty Pack Beast.
Yeah, the Motivator is nice here. So the Motivator combos with the Volley Veteran from earlier, and if he does end up going back into something like a red-white strategy, picking up something like this to keep his options open is a smart move.
Yeah, right now we're really not seeing Mark Jacobson solidify himself into anything in particular. The biggest theme of his draft so far has been that white has been a decently, he's kind of moving in on both the green-white and the red-white, but even those cards have been gold cards.
He wants to be white-green, I think. He obviously starting with Goreclaw and then picking up 2 strong gold uncommons in green-white. He would love to be white, and I think this is a really smart pick of taking the Drill Master over the Goblin Instigator. Again, white-green is the highest ceiling deck that it looks like he can currently draft because of those, all of the powerful rares and uncommons early in the draft. The question is, will he pick up enough, auras and other powerful cards to make it come together?
Yep, not a whole lot in this pack. There is the Oresco Swiftclaw, a Child of Night, a double cast. If you feel like getting fancy, it's just going to be the 3-1.
Yeah, and look, obviously he would rather have a bunch of Enchantresses out before you start dropping Oaken Forms, but sometimes just turn 2 Oresco Swiftclaw, turn 3 Oaken Form is enough.
True, +3/+3 is a pretty substantial hit when you bring it up to that 4 toughness threshold.
Right.
So Mark Jacobson coming towards the end of the first pack, and he's been moving around a little bit, but those 2 Satyr Enchanters have really been a feature for this. But I don't think we've seen really much at all in the form of those auras. Dwarven Priest, the take this time.
Yeah, easier to pick up auras, I think, than the rewards for having auras. There are so many, and people are not everyone's going to want Oaken Forms at the table. I also like the way that he's been able to keep his options of drafting Boros open without sacrificing any of his main plan, which is ideally to stay white-green. So if he were to, open some kind of incredibly strong red card in Pack 2, he could move back into white-red, and he has enough cards to make that happen.
Revitalize is going to be the take, passing a Duress for the last card of another player, and it's going to be a basic Mountain as the final card here for Mark Jacobson. That is going to bring him to the end of this Pack 1. We're going to have a chance to review it. Tell me a little bit about how this Pack 1 has formulated for Mark Jacobson.
Yeah, so, the first big decision point was taking the heroic reinforcements over something like, for example, Centaur Courser, pick 1, Pack 2, or Pack 1, pick 2. Then he kind of just started taking really powerful cards in the Naya colors for the first few packs. When he picked up the second copy of Satyr Enchanter, that was his first real direction that white-green was going to be open. And as you can see, he's got the really nice start to a good white-green deck. Basically everything but the auras being the easiest part of the deck to pick up. You notice to the back 4 playable red cards, if he decides to potentially abandon green and go into white-red. So basically, it looks like he's got the really nice start to a white-green deck. White-red is a fallback plan if that appears to be open. What he needs to be careful of is keeping himself in both of those pools, right? He's going to need to choose, as we've seen, in previous drafts, fairly early on in Pack 2, he's going to want to pick one of these directions and go with it.
Okay, so he's going to really have to solidify himself in one of these lanes, otherwise he risks himself into really diluting both game plans and ending up with 2 mediocre decks as opposed to 1 powerful deck.
Right. What you want to avoid is taking like some mediocre white cards over really good green or red cards because you're trying to keep yourself open longer. You can do that once, but if you do it twice or 3 times, you start sacrificing chunk equity, and your deck doesn't reach that ceiling that you set for it.
Yeah, and these Satyr Enchanters, so much potential in them with 2 of them already. So now every single one of those auras, Oaken form, Talons of Vastwood. Each of these cards suddenly gain this massive amount of boost, and that's not including the white ones like Knightly Valor, which could show up, or even Knight's Pledge.
Or Luminous Bonds, yeah. I mean, so there's a lot of different options for Mark here, and I think, when I'm in this situation and I have the start that Mark has, I just don't want to open some sort of tempting red card. I want to open something solid, maybe even great in white and green, and then be able to kind of put the blinders on and know what I'm doing. I don't want to open a shock out of an otherwise horrible pack.
Yeah, and mentioning that Luminous Bonds, that actually does become relevant. Druid of Horns is actually in this pack as well, alongside another Goreclaw, but that Druid of Horns, it is part of the synergistic kind of enchantment deck, but you need to be putting the auras onto the Druid.
Yeah. Very close pick here. Very tough pick, I think. The Druid of Horns, obviously, again, from a ceiling perspective, that's the card that's going to give him the best ceiling. It would be hard to criticize someone for taking Rabid Bite, his first, real classic removal spell. Second, Goreclaw. I mean, it's a really powerful card too. I don't have a strong inkling as to what I would take. I guess my instinct would be to take the Druid because of the ceiling, but hard to fault him for wanting to grab a removal spell here.
Yeah, that Rabid Bite, it is 2 mana, a sorcery, and one of his creatures is going to deal damage equal to its power to an opposing creature, especially if you are moving into this deck type where your creature's power will be significantly higher than what the initial mana that you put into it. Can really take down some significant creatures. Into this one, we do have Thornhide Wolves. There's a Pegasus Courser, a Greenwood Sentinel.
Yeah, probably a Pegasus Courser for Mark's deck. He's going to be really hoping to table that Knight's Pledge. He would love to have that come around the table. Not a lot of other decks are going to highly value the Knight's Pledge, but this is just kind of a weak booster overall with really only Regal Bloodlord that someone would be really excited about.
Yep, and it's going to be that Pegasus Courser that moves its way into the deck. Another one of these 1/3s for 3. It's got flying, and it works really well in an aggressive strategy deck. I mean, if you're suiting these up and getting them into the air as well.
It works particularly well with green creatures, right? Green creatures tend to be oversized for their mana cost, with the drawback being that they are easy to block, and Pegasus Courser obviously removes that possibility.
Knightly Valor in this pack. This is really one of the first shots that we have at a high value aura, so we might be looking at that one. There are a couple of options, but that one's got to be your first instinct.
Yeah, I know if I'm in Mark's seat here, I'm breathing a sigh of relief, right? You just don't want to go to the end of the draft, and all of a sudden you look down and you have 1 or 2 auras. So getting that first aura out of the way right now in order to be able to kind of start building that critical mass for what your combination portion of the deck is great, and he's going to be really happy to pick up that Knightly Valor here.
Yeah, one of the more powerful auras that you have access to, especially at the uncommon level.
Right.
I guess you could start looking to the rares for things like Prodigious Growth, but +2/+2 Vigilance plus another creature is just fantastic.
Sure, and it helps when you get to draw a card or two when you cast it as well.
Yeah. So we've got Plummet, Loxodon, Linebreaker in this one. A lot of copies of Revitalize working their way around. Not a particularly popular card. And it looks to be taking a look at both this Plummet and that Loxodon Linebreaker. Tell me, when does Plummet become almost a main deck consideration?
This format, it's very close to a main deck consideration. It's almost there, and certainly it's hard to imagine a higher value sideboard card. I think that it's absolutely critical to pick up the first Plummet when you're drafting green. And again, a theme that we've hit on a bunch. Great players draft for the sideboard. They're not just figuring out what 23 cards are going to be best for my main deck. They need to figure out how to win matches, and including Plummet in your final stack of drafted cards is important.
Always important to remember that at least half of your matches are going to be after going to the sideboard.
Right.
Or half of your games, I suppose. So we see Rustwing Falcon. There was also a Manalith in there, a Gargoyle Sentinel.
Yeah, this is the archetype where Gargoyle Sentinel is the weakest because you can infrequently both enchant it with an aura and activate it in attack. So, Mark recognizes that and takes the Rustwing Falcon, wants to get more aggressive, and I really like this pick.
Yep, 1 mana, 1/2 with flying. Having that 2 toughness, so it's actually kind of substantial.
Yeah, maybe he's thinking also about potentially tabling that Knight's Pledge, which goes really well with it.
Looks like we do see a Druid of the Cowl in this one, and we are not too early in this pack to be seeing a card like that.
Yeah, it certainly seems like green is being underdrafted at this table. Mark doesn't have a spectacular Druid of the Cowl deck. You know, he has obviously the Gore Claw, but not a tremendous amount of 4, 5, and 6 drops that they're going to be able to use it, but it's just such a powerful card when it does work. And the baseline, the floor for Druid of the Cowl is so high, he'll be really happy to have it.
Rocks Oracle in this one alongside an Invoke the Divine. You also do have access to another copy of that Rustwing Falcon.
Yeah, I like Rocks Oracle. It's both a card that replaces itself, some nice card drawing, gets you deep in your deck, and is a nice target for auras. Again, when we talk about these aura-based decks, creatures that replace themselves when they enter the battlefield or being able to draw a card when you play your aura can help mitigate some of the damage from getting 2-for-1 when they kill one of your enchanted creatures. So, nice card for his deck.
Yep, drafting with a game plan, and we do see a Novice Knight. This is actually a card that goes pretty nicely into this archetype. It's a pretty valuable 1-mana 2/3 that, unless it's enchanted or equipped, has Defender. But when you're playing a deck that is really going to be running through those enchantments, might go up in value. Looks like not quite there, though.
Yeah, he's a little light still on auras, right? Just the Knightly Valor so far. Thornhide Wolves is a card that's really impressed the experienced players that I've spoken to in this format. Wow, he tables it.
Ooh. Druid of Horns comes back around. This is the one that if you do end up casting an aura spell, targeting it, you are going to be getting a 3/3 in addition to itself.
Yeah.
This is another way to mitigate that 2-for-1 because it's just when you cast it, it's not when it becomes enchanted, but also it just really rewards you by going both wide and tall. And that is the Knight's Pledge that came back around. So he's able to table the Knight's Pledge. We saw him pass that one earlier. You mentioned that he was probably speculating, hoping to see that one come back. And that's going to make its way into the deck.
And he was so excited about it, he almost took Desecrated 2 by accident. I mean, at this point now with the, with all of these rewards for playing auras, he's going to take every single aura that he can get his hands on for the remainder of the draft. They're so valuable to him. He's got 2 so far. If he can pick up 2 or 3 more in pack 3, his deck goes from good to great very quickly. Yeah,
and I mean, he's got 3 of the cards that really reward him for even playing these in the first place.
Yep.
Druid of Horns alongside 2 copies of Satyr Enchanter, 3 of the cards that are really going to give him a massive benefit.
Yep, and nice awareness there by Mark taking a Disperse with 4 cards left in the booster. We saw how effective Max Mick was using, blue bounce spells to defeat a white-green auras deck earlier, and Mark doesn't want to be a similar kind of victim.
Yeah, this is one of those situations. Make sure that when you're drafting with that game plan, if there's nothing for you here, what's the card that's really going to be effective against you?
Mm-hmm.
Snapping Drake is going to be the grab. Walking Corpse is going to head on down the line, and we are going to find ourselves with a Forest.
This draft reminds me a lot of Tiago Saporito's draft from Draft 1 in that he was dabbling in 3 different colors. He kind of solidified early in Pack 2. But the difference here is that Mark actually has the powerful uncommons and rares that lean him more towards that 7, 8, 9 out of 10 rather than kind of a mediocre deck where you're just praying to 2-1. So great start after 2 packs for Mark Jacobson.
And we saw that he was able to make 2 really good table. Taking another card with this assumption that the card that he also really wanted, that Knight's Pledge, that Druid of the Horns, both of them came back around to him, a massive way to gain that advantage from a card that he may have actually wanted more at the time.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense to be interested to talk to Mark and understand when he took the Rabid Bite over the Druid of the Horns, if that was in the back of his mind, potentially tabling the Druid. It was a risky move, obviously, with a card that's so powerful in his particular archetype, but it worked out beautifully, and he ended up with both of the cards that he wanted out of that pack, which is just great drafting.
And really nicely, we did see him solidify into a singular deck. Heading into Pack 2, the big challenge was going to be making sure that you pick a lane, commit to a game plan, either the green-white deck or that red-white deck, and it really seems like he has fallen into this green-white deck pretty nicely.
Yeah, from the moment he got the second Satyr, he wanted to be white-green. I think he just, again, the way he kept himself into red or open for red was a way that was not sacrificing any major picks for his preferred archetype. So he kept himself open in a smart way, and now, as you see, has not only plenty of cards in white-green, but a nice curve, good synergies, removal, and power level. So he's in one of those kind of dream draft situations where things don't have to go great in Pack 3 for him to have a good deck, but if they do, he could have an incredible deck. If he picks up, for example, one more good rare, a couple more good auras, and continues to fill out his curve, he could go from having maybe a 6 or a 7 to a 9 or a 10.
Yeah, and I think one of those things that I'm just seeing is that right now, really only 2 of those enchantments that he really wants to be casting.
Right.
I think that's probably the biggest deficit that I see, but of course you're the expert.
Yeah, no, that's it. He would ideally like to have in this archetype somewhere between 4 and 6 total auras. The good news, like I said before, is that there shouldn't be a lot of other people out there that want, Talons, that want Oaken Forms, that sort of thing. So if those cards get open in the boosters, he should have a pretty good chance to get them. He just needs, obviously the packs to break the right way.
Yeah, and that's going to be really a big thing on his mind as he heads into Pack 3, but he's got to be feeling pretty happy with the way that this has turned out.
Again, evasion, removal, curve, power level, he's covered all of those bases. He knows what 2 colors he's supposed to be. And, I think that based on the way Pack 1 went, he can feel pretty good that he's not going to get, cut out of either of his colors, for Pack 3.
Yep, Luminous Bonds might also be a really high-profile pick for him.
Sure.
Because having access to yet another piece of removal that's also part of that proactive game plan becomes pretty nice. So looks like we are going to be getting ready for Pack 3 here, and this is going to be an interesting one to see how it turns out. This deck so far looking like a pretty cool one to watch when we get into the actual rounds of Magic and as we head into round 13.
Mm-hmm. And you notice also Mark really has none of the dual lands, nothing like Gift of Paradise, no ways to real splash, no Rupture Spire. So he doesn't really have a lot of incentive to dip into a third color, so he can really kind of stay disciplined and focused here.
So heading into it, he knows most of the other players of the round. He's also at X2. So one thing just to keep in mind as we're, first of all, going through this draft and also going through the rounds is that for all of these players at this table, they are all 10-2. These will be elimination rounds.
Yeah,
for them.
Being at Pod 2 at 10-2, a 3-0 is enough to get you in. A 2-1 is not enough to get you in. So it's basically that simple.
Oakenform and Starcrowned Stag, both the cards in the pack. We see Mark bringing that Starcrowned Stag to the front, but really have some eyes on that Oakenform. Starcrowned Stag, very powerful common in this format. A 4-mana 3/3 that when it attacks you tap an opposing creature, and that Oakenform, one of those auras he's really looking for.
Right, and what he's doing right now is counting the rest of the cards in the booster to see how many of them other people might take, to see if there's any possibility of getting Oakenform around. I think if he looks at the booster, there probably aren't enough playables that he can table the Oakenform. I think that the Stag is still enough better than Oakenform that he has to just make that disciplined pick and just rely on getting past some auras. But obviously he'll be crossing his fingers that maybe the Oakenform comes around.
Yeah, and that Starcrowned Stag, another great piece of aggression. It wears those auras very nicely. And we're going to head in. There's another Starcrowned Stag, Hieromancer's Cage. Now that one is an enchantment, but it is not an aura, notably. But still a very powerful card.
Yeah, one of the best removal spells in the set, and it's it's on theme. So thrilled to get past that card. Certainly one of the cards that he would most be hoping at the sub rare level he'd be seeing right now.
Yeah, and seeing access to also just some really nice both green and white cards in this pack. So taking a look, there's another Starcrowned Stag. There is another one of these Shield Mares. There's a Colossal Dreadmaw. A lot of really good options in that green-white pack.
Yep, and unfortunately for him, there's also an Exclusion Mage, which is the kind of card he would not like to pass to the left, but certainly no thought of making a defensive draft at this point.
Mm-hmm. On to the next pack, and we see Diamond Mare, Colossal Dreadmaw. We do see another copy of Oakenform. We do also have the green-white land, Tranquil Expanse.
Yeah, I mean, for this, to me at least, is a clear Oakenform, right? In other archetypes, Colossal Dreadmaw would be, superior to Oakenform, but in his deck with 3 cards that synergize with Oakenform, it's exactly the kind of card that he wants.
I mean, Oakenform, he wants more auras. That +3/+3 is an enormous boost for
perfect.
For
yeah,
3
it's
mana.
the perfect card basically for him at this point. So he's thrilled.
Maybe a Blanchwood Armor would make him happy too. That'd be fine.
He wouldn't throw it in the trash. I'll tell you that right now.
Though I guess Oakenform and Blanchwood Armor are very similar in a lot
right.
of ways. Often kind of a similar card until you really get into that larger number of forests
Sure.
into the later portion of the game.
And he's got a heavy white component as well, so hard to imagine he'll have much more than 8 forests in his deck.
Colossal Majesty, a card that he's also taken a look at the Cavalry Drill Master. That Colossal Majesty, an enchantment that gives you a pretty good reward for having a creature with power 4 or greater. If you are talking about suiting up your creatures with some of these auras, maybe consideration.
Yeah, it's possible. You know, it's tough. His deck is not going to be able to reliably trigger it, but the reward for being able to do so is so strong that he's going to try to take it. It's a little bit of an ambitious pick, but truthfully, his deck doesn't need that much more of the Cavalry Drill Master type action, so certainly defensible.
There's another Knightly Valor, so he's going to have access to yet another one of these, and an Oaken form as well. Gets to have his favorite of them, pretty much just curve considerations more than anything, but Knightly Valor.
Yeah, Knightly Valor is just perfect. I mean, yeah, he was hoping to get a Knightly Valor. He's probably, you know, doing a jig in his head right now. It's about as good as you could possibly expect to get past at this point. We talked about the one thing his deck was missing was a few auras. He's picked up a removal spell and 2 really strong auras already in pack 3. So it's just going extremely well for Mark here.
Yeah, at this point, really everything is just icing on the cake that he has made for himself. A Mighty Leap is the card in this hand. There's also a Wall of Vines. Those are about the only cards that are on color, and that Wall of Vines is not great. So we might also just see Mark looking to make a draft that eliminates something from someone else's pool.
Yeah, there's some possibility that he'll want to play Mighty Leap. If you build up a large enough ground creature, sometimes Mighty Leap can be pretty powerful. He probably will be looking to put that card in his sideboard, and there certainly was some consideration to defensively drafting the Regal Bloodlord, but, you know, definitely defensible to just grab the Mighty Leap. Oh my god.
Another Druid of Horns. If he wants that card, that would bring him up to 4 payoffs plus that Colossal Majesty, which is another pseudo payoff if he's able to get those auras already underway. But 2 copies of Druid of Horns, 2 copies of Satyr Enchanter, and a pretty nice swath of those auras at the moment. Really, things are just getting better for Mark.
Yeah, if you bought Mark Jacobson's stock midway through Pack 2, right now he just released quarterly earnings reports, and they were very positive.
Militia Bugler, now the card in hand. It's a naturally vigilant 2/3 for 3 mana. It also does offer the opportunity for some card advantage in just replacing itself with another creature with power 2 or less.
Yeah, no, Militia Bugler is beautiful. It helps him find those Druid of the Horns, so and as well as the Satyr. So he's going to be thrilled to have that as well.
Yes, all 4 of those cards that he's taken are power 2 and less. So that just pushes him into finding the incredible payoffs that he has put himself into having.
Yeah, and he also finds his Pegasus Coursers. I mean, Militia Bugler beautiful. Also has Vigilance, so it's a card that wears Oaken form well.
Both offensively and defensively, that's going to be a powerful card. We do see a Millstone. We've also got Daybreak Chaplain. Isolate, probably not a consideration.
No.
Is there any argument whatsoever for Millstone in a deck like this?
Not really. I mean, the Chaplain also with Lifelink could potentially have some value with all the ways he has to buff it. So
Daybreak Chaplain. I mean, the Lifelink also just leads to some pretty powerful life total swings. We see Titanic Growth, we see Explosive Apparatus, and we see that copy of Shield Mare. That's going to be another card that benefits Mark as that removal comes in from the opponent. Anytime that it gets targeted by a spell or an ability that they control, you gain 3 life. When it enters, you gain 3 life. It can't be blocked by red creatures. Yeah,
3 mana, 2/3, gain 3 life is already playable. The fact that it has all of the text as well, plus it can be found by his Militia Bugler. It's certainly a card he'll be very happy to put in his deck.
I think it's safe to say that Mark has found where his seat wanted to be.
Yes, no question about that.
Explosive Apparatus, also a Knight of the Tusk. The Apparatus, it's okay.
Yeah, this it's kind of card that you want to put in your deck occasionally to deal with particularly problematic utility creatures, potentially something that your Luminous Bond type effect won't deal with. Mystic Archaeologist being like a classic example of something that you really need Explosive Apparatus for.
Active Treason is going to be the take there for Mark. Probably really excited not to know that there's one less Active Treason that might lead to someone beating him with his own creature.
Right, so Active Treason, obviously quite good in red-black sacrifice. We mentioned Tiago Saporito's white-blue deck wasn't scared of Active Treason. Active Treason happens to be systemically really strong against Mark's deck.
Yep, and we are taking a look. Looks like Wall of Vines is going to be the take, just passing a dual land, and the last card here, Tolarian Scholar. But I really feel like there's not a whole lot that he needs to learn. He just put on a nice showcase of what this green-white deck could become.
Yeah, I mean, just great drafting, honestly. I thought that early on in the draft he went for power level. He really correctly identified the correct colors to be in. At every single inflection point when he needed to kind of continue to coalesce and triangulate on the exact archetype he needed to be, he made the decisions correctly and then was rewarded by tabling the Druid in Pack 2. I mean, everything, not only did he manipulate the draft well, but was rewarded for it by the way the packs broke. So he's going to be thrilled with this deck and I think has a great shot of locking in a top 8.
Well, that is one draft down as we are heading into the second one, but we are going to have a couple more for you. Join us again in just a couple of minutes. We'll be right back after this.